Say thank you so much for being here. Friends, Greg has become a friend of mine over the last few years. One of those introductions that, oh my God, you need to meet this guy. And I'm so glad we did. Greg runs, is it a company called Work Happy? Greg runs a brand
Yeah.
called Work Happy. He works with organizations, workplaces to create a happy workforce because a happy workforce is a more productive workforce. You can find him at gregketner.com.
Yep.
I
Correct.
will drop that in the chat. And with that, I'm going to leave it to you, Greg. Do your thing, man. Work your magic.
Great. Thank you, Mike, and thank you, everybody. Thanks, Sal and Lynn and Julian. What amazing people you've come over or come through a lot, and I commend you. And you are making a difference because the more we talk about mental well-being, the better we all are. I come from men's health from a different angle. And now I help organizations, like Mike said, how do we work happy? But more importantly, how do we talk about mental health in the workplace and at home? Because it's so very important. And I'm actually, and I'll blame it on this, Mike. It's 1:30 in the morning. I'm in London. I'm here for summit. And it's just amazing when we have conversations. And it hit me again yesterday during the lunch break. I ended up going to lunch with this gal, and we were just sitting down. She said, "What do you do, and why do you do it?" And I told her my story. And within 45 minutes, as we were walking back to the event room, she said, "Hey, can I tell you something?" I said, "Absolutely, sure." And she goes, "Over the last 2 years, I have tried taking my life 3 times." So we went from perfect strangers. She's a friend of a friend, within 45 minutes and having a conversation. So I wanted to share with you, how do we talk about it and why we need to talk more about mental health. The kids adage, sticks and stones will hurt my bones, but words will never hurt me, is completely false. I know that from experience, and probably a lot of you as well too, right? When we were kids, we probably don't remember the fights that we got in, but we remember the words, and words matter. And so I want to share again, how do we talk things like this? In my former life, I did sales professionally for sports teams, and I also did stand-up comedy for 6 years. I had the opportunity to meet and work with Robin Williams one night. And the one thing that he told me after the show was like, "Greg, keep making people laugh because you'll never know the difference that you will make in their lives." And so I come at it from a different approach. 6 years ago on Monday, my daughter lost her father to suicide. And at that time, I didn't know what to say or what to do. I used the wrong terminology. I thought people were selfish. I didn't know if I could catch it, that kind of thing. And I remember distinctly 2 nights before we found out that her dad had passed. We were at a Brian Regan concert. I'd worked for a hockey team at the time, and so we got to the stadium, and I took her down to where we worked. Excuse me. And I had set it up so that we got a meet and greet with Brian Regan. She went and knocked on the door. Brian opened up the door and said, "Rachel, thank you so much for coming to my show." I'd been a stepdad for a year. Becky and I had just been married for a year. So we had a wonderful time. We had 10 minutes with Brian Regan, went up to our seats, enjoyed the show immensely. And she really loves Brian Regan. She's a kid. She was 13 at the time, so great memory. She could remember any of Brian's punchlines, but she couldn't remember to feed the dog on the way out the door on the way to school. And so within 48 hours, we had found out that her dad had passed. And Becky and I found out at 2:18 in the morning, and we spent the next 4.5 hours until she woke up. How do you talk about mental health? How do you tell a 13-year-old that her dad has gone by suicide? And so since then, I've learned a lot. I've taken classes. I've gone to a lot of therapy. I've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of conversations. And what brings me joy in my purpose now is to help other people talk about mental health and leave people better than when I found them. And the biggest reason, and I think Julian touched on it as well, that we don't talk, especially as men, right? We don't talk about it because of the shame and the guilt that surrounds it. But what I'm finding out and what the research shows that when you do have these conversations and then go and seek medical advice or therapy or whatnot, it can make a huge difference and impact in our lives. And I just recently read a study by Lyra Health saying that 8 out of 10 people won't even go and talk to their manager or their HR people because of the shame and the guilt. And my job is to get up there and say, look, if a skinny John Goodman or a fat Prince Harry, whatever your choice is, can go to therapy and talk about mental health, anybody should be able to do that too. And I have story after story. And when this all came down, I heard the word mental health, and I think we need to change even that vernacular. I'm trying to start to say well-being or brain health or mental fitness, right? Because you don't go to the, gym. People don't think you're weird because you go to the gym, but people still think that we're weird, or the perception might be weird that we go to therapy. But my theory is it's really hard to read the label on the jar when you're sitting inside, right? So why don't we go and talk to people, whether it's your marriage or finances or your kid or your own personal mental health. If we go and talk to a professional, and the spectrum on mental health and well-being, see, I'm still working on it, but it can be anywhere from, I feel overwhelmed today, or I have some anxiety, I have a presentation, or it can be extreme, bipolar or abuse, all those kinds of things. So it's a huge range. And so my goal is to have men that talk about this, have conversations, so we can all get the help that we deserve. One quick story. This is Steve from Halifax. I'm in London now. I live in Walla Walla, but I am Canadian, so don't hold the US against me. But apparently when you get married, you have to live in the same town as your wife, which was in the fine print, which as a guy, I didn't read it. So I was out in Halifax giving a keynote, how to work happy within your organization. And I went out to the Bay of Fundy because for my own mental health, I want to get out, go for a walk, get some exercise. And the Bay of Fundy, if you don't know, is the biggest tide change in the world. It's about 12 to 14 feet. And so I was taking pictures. I turned around and I saw this guy. And I love Steve, but he didn't look like he had a whole lot of friends. And my first thought was like, you know what? I'm here for myself. I'm just going to go out and do my thing and ignore Steve. But he had a 49ers hat on. I'm a huge 49ers fan, big sports fan. And so I made a quick joke and I made him laugh. And I said, you know what? My favorite team is the 49ers and anybody playing the Dallas Cowboys because I hate the Cowboys. He laughed and we started a conversation. And the first thing I noticed about Steve, he had a really bad stuttering problem. It took a long time just to say hello. And so we had a quick conversation. I said, hey, man, I'm going to go for the 30-minute walk. You want to join me? He goes, I would love that. And I just listened to Steve for the first 20, 30 minutes. And he told me about his family and what was going on. And I said, well, have you been here before? And he goes, no, it's actually the first time I've been outside of my house in literally in 3 months. And come to find out, he'd lost his job. And a couple of weeks after that, his mom had passed away. And he just fell into depression. And he said the only friend that he had one buddy that would come over. They would watch hockey and drink beer. And that was about the extent of it. And so I just kept on talking and, or listening. And then he asked me, he said, well, what about you? What's your story? And so I shared briefly about, my stepdaughter losing her dad and stuff and how we went to therapy and whatnot. And once we have a conversation with a dude, right, we're doing stuff shoulder to shoulder, whether it's volunteering or serving other people, just in conversation, whatever it is at a pub. But when we have that relationship, we can ask him things about like, well, have you tried therapy? And I asked him, and he said the same thing that I used to say. You know what? Boys don't cry, suck it up. I don't need therapy. I got it. So we continued the conversation. We went down, checked it all out. Obviously, we didn't wait for 12 hours for the water to come back up. But as we were getting back to the cars, I said, hey, it was really a pleasure to meet you. And he said, without a stutter, Greg, I'm going to go talk to my doctor tomorrow about therapy. And I couldn't believe the change in Steve within 45 minutes. He was stuttering, he couldn't talk, and now he was speaking normal. So that just proves the power of having conversations with other people and meeting them where they are. Words matter. They matter for me, they matter for you, they matter for everybody. And I found this to be very real about 8 months ago. I just posted on Facebook 4 words: you matter to me. It was on a purple background. I posted it and I checked in a couple hours later because I wanted to see how many likes I had, how many people were following. And there was 2 likes on it and no comments, which is typical when we're talking about mental well-being. But about 3 days later, I got this long Facebook message from a friend that I worked with back in Seattle at another hockey team. And we kept in touch with each other. I knew that she had gotten married and had a kid and was into trail running and all sorts of things. And the message was just, Greg, you have no idea the words that you say, how much they matter to me. And I thought I should let you know. And she went on to say that she was struggling during COVID, going through a divorce. Her kid was struggling in school, being on Zoom, and had some learning disabilities. And she said she, became depressed, dealing with depression. And to combat the depression, she was trying to do exercise and she would go trail running. And it continued in saying, you know what, Greg, it got to the point I couldn't find a therapist. I didn't know what to do. And so I had a plan to end my life. And I decided that I was going to go trail running and run off a cliff and everything would be better for everybody else. So now I'm sitting there crying and reading this note. And she said, that morning, I saw your message on Facebook. You matter to me, and thought, I matter to Greg. We hadn't spoken in over 25 years. And because of one post, 4 words, she decided not to go running that day. And again, when we talk about what ails us, it helps us. It lets us know that somebody is there. And I know Julian was saying he wished people would have reached out. And that reminds me, I have 2 friends in my life that have suffered abuse from their female partners. And so I'm going to reach out to them and let them know that, hey, it is okay to go to therapy. And I'll probably connect you with them as well too, Julian. I hope that's okay. One of the biggest determinants of happiness in the workplace and in our lives is the friends, the close connections we have. Out of this whole event with Rachel losing her dad and myself and my wife and all 3 of us going to therapy, I joined a group called Reach Out Walla Walla, is where I'm from. And we started doing a group, and every 4th Sunday of every month, we go to the Christian Aid Center, and dudes, for 3 hours, we cook and serve the homeless people in our community. And it's been so therapeutic, not only for me, but for the other guys. And here is a couple of my buddies, Andre, Scott, and Julian. And it's been amazing because I didn't want to make the group a mental health group. I wanted to bring guys together who could rely on each other and have different conversations. And what we found over the last year and a half is guys having conversations outside. One of the gentlemen, I was working at a Starbucks one morning, came in and I said, hey man, how are you doing? And he just started bawling. And I said, what is going on? He said, my wife left me. I'm a chronic drinker and gambler, and I don't know what to do. But because I had a relationship, he felt comfortable enough to say that to me in front of a Starbucks. So here's 2 grown men crying. And he said, I need to go to an AA meeting, but I'm scared. I don't know what to do. So I pulled out my phone and Googled AA meetings in Walla Walla, and we went to a meeting. And he was like, well, why would you go to a meeting? You don't have a drinking problem. And I said, yeah, but you do. And I'm your buddy. And if we talk about this, and then about 2 weeks later, he texted me and said, hey, I'm checking into rehab for 30 days. I won't be able to talk to you or golf with you, but thank you for helping me to get to where I am. And that only happened because we were both in the same group and we had conversations about sports. We've golfed together. We've talked about our wives. We've talked about our kids. So again, when we talk to each other and reach out, it's so much better for everybody. And just finally, there's a guy, he recently passed away about 10 years ago. His name is Don Ritchie. Lives down in Australia, and he lived across one of the most common place for people in Australia to end their lives. It's called the Gap. It's a beautiful cliff on the coast of Australia. And for over 40 years, Don was an insurance salesman, but he had the gift of talking to people and listening and being empathetic. And every time he would see someone walking by themselves towards the Gap, his house was right across the street. He would walk out and say, "Hey, you want to come in? I got some tea. Let's have a conversation." And he said, and his wife said, that he has probably saved 150 suicides because he had a conversation. People felt okay to talk. They went, got therapy, talked to their doctors, whether it's medicine or whatever it works best for those persons. And so they did some more research to this. The story got out, got in the papers, and they now estimate he's saved over 450 lives and people taking their lives because of a single conversation. And so I made it my mission to help help a million people talk about mental health. And I just think it's so important. And if you're listening, please reshare. Tell some of these stories because it's so important. If you're struggling yourself with your mental well-being, reach out. I'm not sure what it is in Canada, but I know 911. But reach out to Mike, reach out to me, Julian, whoever it is, right? Reach out and have a conversation. You're safe, you're fine with us, but lives can be saved. And I will end with this story because I might cry, but that's okay. This happened to me in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Back in November, I was giving the closing keynote address, and my whole talk is about how to work happy. And when it comes to mental well-being, reach out. And so after the event, a friend of mine that I had known for years earlier at the same conference came up to me. We're having dinner, and he said, "Greg, thank you so much again for your talk. I really appreciate it. It meant a lot to me." And I said, "That's great, Scott, but what's, kind of the same talk, and I post all the time online." He said, "It works." And I said, "Oh, okay." And he got a little bit teary, and I was like, "Oh boy." He said, 6 weeks ago, I had a plan to end my life. I left work, I got in my truck, went and bought a pistol, got back in my truck, and I was going to go to the river where I like to fish, and I was going to end my life. And between buying the pistol and getting to the river, your voice kept going in my head, reach out, reach out, reach out. He said he stopped the car, called his sister. They talked for over an hour. She came and got him. He's in therapy, and he's telling me the story. And it's the first time in my life that I've ever cried into a beer. And I said, "Thank you so much for sharing that, Scott, because when we talk about what ails us, we're better together." And again, if you need help, if you need someone to listen, someone to talk to, I'm here for you. Mike is here, Phil's, Julian, any of these guys who talk. But as a from guy to guy, we need to do more talking, because when we talk, we can save lives. Thank you.
Greg, thank you so much. There is a magic that happens when guys come together with intention. There's a magic that happens when we have that conversation, when we can open up, be vulnerable. And I wholeheartedly agree with you on the mental health thing. I mean, just changing the language is so important. And, to your point, I think for most of us men, our vocabulary when it comes to mental health is 6 words. Are you good? Yeah, I'm good. And that's the extent of it. And I think it's so important, to use that fitness analogy. It's a point in time measure, and sometimes I'm here, or somewhere in between. And I know that fitness requires maintenance, and I know that I can always improve.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that question, when all the time, and I've always done it too. How are you doing? I'm good. ask that question again.
Really?
How are you really doing? What's going on? I've got 10 minutes. Let's have a conversation. And when we do that, people realize, okay, he's here to help me. He is empathetic. He will listen. And there's magic in those conversations when we ask it again.
All right, friends, we got 5 minutes to Dr. Kelly. So once again, Greg, thank you so much. Now you can go back to bed. So I'm not sure if you caught that, but Greg is up at what, 2 o'clock in the morning right now?
Yep.
Over in the UK. He's at the, you cut out a little bit. So it's the World Happiness Summit. Is that where it is?
It is, yeah.
Greg
It's
is,
been amazing.
so are you still in conference tomorrow?
No, today was the last day.
Nice. All right, brother, go get some sleep and let's
Thank you,
connect
everyone.
when you get back home. Take care.
All right, keep talking.
All right, friends, I will see you over in our next webinar.